Welcome back to the Sonic Days podcast. We're delighted to bring you a new season of talks recorded live at Sonic Days 2024. Today we're diving into designing immersive concerts. This session explores key elements of creating spatial sound systems featuring real-life examples from festivals, installations, and theater productions. You'll hear about the challenges and creative opportunities that arise when scaling setups from small studios to massive festival stages. Joining us are Ianina Canalis, application architect and spatial audio specialist at Meyer, and Arve Gotfredsen, technical support specialist for Meyer in Northern Europe.
Hi everyone, welcome to this wonderful event. So the idea of today is to discuss some challenges that we can find when we work with immersive audio configurations. So what we need to think when we place the loudspeaker, what are the different things that we need to think when we design a system, and then some considerations that we need to have when we mix. So my name is Ianina Canalis. I work at Meyer in the software department. I part of the development team for Space Map Go and Nebra, which is the connection manager. And it's software that will grow up with time. And with us is...
And I'm Arve Gotfredsen. I'm based here in Denmark, as you can well hear on my accent, I guess. And I'm in tech support.
We are going to discuss a few things together. So, challenges, loudspeaker layout, what we can do. So there are different parts that we can find in an immersive audio setup, and we are going to take different parts of it. So let's start with the frontal. So sometimes we can have an immersive or a surround or a multi-channel setup where you can have loudspeakers that surround the audience, but at the front you can decide if you want to have a stereo system or a frontal system with 3 loudspeakers or with 5 or with 4 like we have here. But before that, just to be sure that we understand some details, probably everybody knows this, but just a friendly reminder, when we recognize a sound in the horizontal plane that comes to the right, it's because mainly that sound arrives first to my right ear and second to my left ear. Then we have another clue, which is the spectral change, the frequency, because of the shadow of the head. Now, depending on the angle, I will receive less high frequency on the opposite ear. And finally, and the less important clue, is the differentiation of level. Like to move or transmit 20 centimeters more for a sound in dB, that is not an important difference. However, when we mix in stereo, we are using that clue, the level. So we mix in stereo and we position sound sources from left to right using level. No differentiation in time, no differentiation in a spectral. Because when you are in a stereo system, you are in the center and you receive both signals. So you have a mono signal, and a pair of signals that come from left and right. If you pan your sound source in the center, you will receive exactly the same energy, the same frequency. Then if you pan, you will receive the same signal but with different levels. No differentiation in time, no differentiation in any spectral. But it's great because we can position different sound sources between 2 loudspeakers, even in places where there is no loudspeaker at all. Like, for example, the voice, no? Mainly in the stereo mixes, you have in the center the voice, the snare, the bass drum, and it's not real, it's a virtual source, but we can cheat our brain pretty well. However, when we have real sources, now I can choose one position. So, for example, in here we have an stereo mix. I want to place the sound here, so I use the pan pot, and I will have more energy in this loudspeaker than the other one. And if I'm sitting in the center, I will perceive the virtual source in this position. However, if I have a multi-channel setup, I could play the same source, but using only one loudspeaker. The good thing about this is I'm going to recognize this position because there is a differentiation in time between the arrival time of this pair of signal from the same loudspeaker, and I will have the acoustic shadow, blah, blah. So we can have these 2 different configurations, and this is going to be one of the advantages, that you will recognize the position of the sound sources because of the real loudspeaker position. So then we can decide, okay, how many loudspeakers we want to have at the front, like only a mono, or we can have an stereo, or we can have left, center, right, which is a configuration that was widely used by cinema. And what they used to play in the center in cinema? For what sound sources they use the central channel? For the voices, no? What is that for? Why is the reason for it? It's more natural, but there is something interesting. Like if, for example, I place my voice in a stereo system in the center, you will perceive my voice in the center, but only you, the central line. No, if you are sitting there, my voice will come from that loudspeaker, and if you are sitting there, my voice will come from the other loudspeaker. So the main advantage of having a central channel, and if I place the voices here for everybody in the audience, if this loudspeaker has the correct coverage for the surface audience, everybody will perceive the sound coming from this position, something that does not happen in stereo. So then we can discuss, okay, we can also have 4 at the front. But have you seen 4? No, it's like or 3 or stereo, or 3 left, center, right, or maybe 5 or maybe 7. But why we don't use even numbers? Like, can you imagine why is that? Because we don't have the center, and most of the time we have one singer or one main instrument. But if we have 2 singers, we could have 4 loudspeakers and place one here and the other one there. No, it's depend on what you need. And then we can have these 5 frontals that we have here, and even we can have more amount of the speakers. So mainly one of the advantages is that you can, if you use one loudspeaker by sound source, you can find what is the location of that sound source without, it does not matter where your position in the audience is. That's the main advantage in comparison with the stereo. Then we can discuss what is the correlated and uncorrelated signals. So if we place the same signal in 2 loudspeakers, we have a correlated signal with something that's mono. And then if we have something that is completely different in one channel in comparison to the other one, those signals are uncorrelated. So a mono system will be correlated. In a stereo system, we can have both, because when we place tracks or audio in the center, that signal will be the same for both loudspeakers. But when we have something in a stereo, I don't know, left guitar on the left, right guitar on the other side, we have uncorrelated signals. So we can build them depending on what we decide on the mixer. And then we can have a multi-channel setup that also we can have correlated or uncorrelated signals, but we would like to have more uncorrelated signals than correlated ones. When we normally set up or design a system that is mono, what we are going to try to avoid is that they overlap coverage. No, so this one will cover this area, this one will cover the other one. When we have a stereo system, when we have a multi-channel first, in this case, what we are going to do is exactly the opposite, because they send different signals. So if I place here my voice, and then I place there a guitar, and then I place here a piano, I want that everybody can perceive the signals from all the loudspeakers. So the main concept that we change when we work with multi-channel setup is that we need to overlap the coverage. And look at what happened with the stereo. When we use a stereo, mainly in big places, we avoid that they overlap too much. So in a studio, it's great. We want that the position where people mix completely overlap left to right. But when I'm in a big system and this distance could be maybe 20 or 25 meters, I don't want that they overlap too much, because if not, the difference in time between the left loudspeaker and the opposite side, it will be too much. So we overlap just a little bit, not too much. And then we add more subsystems, but we never try to overlap. So if I have here an outfield, I will try to continue the coverage, something similar like with the mono signal. Great. So correlated signals, we cover every listener with one loudspeaker, max 2. With uncorrelated systems, we cover all the audience with all the loudspeakers. So how we translate this into a map file? Map3D is the prediction software from Meyer Sound. So here I have a frontal system. This is a top view. I can see the speaker on the left, then the second one. And what you can see is that I'm trying to overlap the coverage as much as I can. And this is the result. So this is one of the things that we need to change the chip when we design sound systems for immersive configuration, overlap coverages. But then we have other challenges. What happened between the distance? How far apart can be one loudspeaker to another one? And what is good, what is bad, or what could be the problem I can find? So to understand this, we need to remember three different stages that we can have in this situation. One is when two loudspeakers generate coherent signals. We have the same waveform, and we have these three different possibilities. So the three possibilities, one is what happened with the stereo. So if I have two loudspeakers with the same signal, and I can pan this signal, but the effect will happen when you are exactly in the center, around 1 millisecond. So that means that if you change one step to the right, you are not in the stereo. That effect won't happen. The second effect, it will happen, is as soon as you are a little bit closer to one loudspeaker, the arrival time, it will indicate you what loudspeaker arrived first, and that will give you the clue, the sound is coming from that loudspeaker. Even when you are receiving two signals from these two different loudspeakers, the first one will tell you, this comes from this loudspeaker. And then when we have these signals that arrive first and the other one that arrive later, if they are close in time, my brain integrates that as one signal, and I just identify the position with the difference of time that the second signal is arriving. But in the third case, what is going to happen, what this differentiation in time is too much, I'm going to perceive an echo. So at some point, I'm going to perceive two signals. We can find a lot of bibliography with a lot of graphs. I like this one because it gives you a wide idea about what happened. So in this case, it's like, okay, I'm receiving in zero time the first reflection and the second reflection. I'm talking about reflection, but it's this idea that I have one loudspeaker and the other loudspeaker with the same signal, but delay in time because I moved the position or whatever. So then if I receive the signal 10 milliseconds later, but the signal is below, for example, 20 dB from the original one, so I won't listen to any echo or anything. If I'm in this area, so when the signal arrives 10 dB less, even it could be arrive louder, but 10 milliseconds later, I will have this effect. So I will perceive kind of a spatiality, like it's like a small reverb, or I will feel that the image is wide. And if I overpass this limit, I'm going to start to listen to echo. And as soon as I have more differentiation in time, this is how the perception will be changed. So we can translate this to a real situation. So if I'm, for example, in this position, it's because, for example, I have these two loudspeakers. My virtual sound source is in the center, but I'm not in the center. So I'm going to receive a reflection 20 milliseconds later, say maybe 5 dB less, so I'm going to be in this area. Or I could have another situation where now the sound is panned to the left. So this is the virtual image. This is generated with Octave, which is a open source like MATLAB software. And in this case, I will receive maybe 20 milliseconds later, but 10 dB more the reflection. So in that case, I will perceive echo. And this is crazy because we are considering quite normal distances. This is not too much. This is in meters. So these loudspeakers are 14 meters apart, and I'm 10 meters away from I'm some meters away from the system. It's not too much, so I could perceive an echo. However, all of us, we were in different situations in a very big venues, and nobody heard an echo like this. And mainly it's because we are trying to overlap the coverage from the stereo. But it came to an issue when we have a multi-channel setup. A very interesting idea that Bob McCarthy proposed in his book is that if you have a left and right system and you predict 50 hertz in both loudspeakers, you will see the nodes where the cancellation is happening, these corridors, and that you will tell you that between these node lines, you have a difference in time between the left and the right loudspeaker in any surface below 10 milliseconds. Out of this area, it will be bigger than that. Is it okay what I mean? So now, when we mix in a frontal, let's come back to the challenge. Now we have a lot of more information to analyze this problem or this thing. So if we place one instrument, I could take several decisions. One is I place the instrument 100% in one loudspeaker. No issues at all, not con filter, not everything. So, and 100% of clarity. And it's very interesting when I did several examples where you mix, for example, in a stereo, and then you have a voice in the center, which is a virtual sound source. And then I change to a frontal configuration, and I need to reduce the level of the voice, even that I'm using one loudspeaker, and the clarity improves. So If you want to have something with a lot of clarity, to use one loudspeaker is great. If you want to have maybe more diffuse sound, maybe it's better that you share in several loudspeakers. But when you pan from one loudspeaker to another one, so we are talking about consecutive loudspeakers, and this word is quite important, I can think of what happened in distance between this loudspeaker and the next one, because depending on your position, you will receive different times. Yeah. So this distance, if it's too big, like 20 meters, 25 meters from the first loudspeaker and the fifth one in a stereo system, and I pan and I overlap 100% of the coverage, I could find some echoes, or maybe I started to feel some sound that is not so precise. So when I add more sound source, more loudspeakers in the middle, it's great because then I can pan from one loudspeaker to another one, and I'm minimizing this error that I can have in a 25-meter long stage. But then I need to be careful because the tools give me the possibility to spread that sound. And then if I spread again the sound between all these loudspeakers, or if I have a stereo subgroup and I place one in the first loudspeaker and the other channel in the fifth, I'm going to have this big difference with 100% overlap that in the stereo system does not happen. So these are the things that we need to be aware of. So yeah, this is what I meant. Like in a stereo system, we don't overlap, but in the multi-channel setup, yes. So we need to be careful when we don't use consecutive loudspeakers and we use extreme loudspeakers, what could happen? Any questions in here?
I have a question. What if you want to experiment with you mentioned distance between speakers, but now they are kind of like just surrounding and the same height. What if I want to put one speaker here and another there? And can you speak a little bit to the distance between speakers, but in a different position?
Yes, that's the next point. Opposite loudspeakers, for example. That could be an example. And this is completely different because now the situation is radical different. Now what happened if I place the snare in this loudspeaker and the bass drum at the back? Maybe it's strange. Maybe it sounds strange because we are very used to have everything in the center. But just for this example, imagine this situation. If the place is like this size, it's going to be okay in time if I'm sitting here or if I'm sitting there. But if the place starts to be bigger, I will listen here first the snare and then later the bass drum, and that will be a mess. So that brings another problem, which is how can I mix? So for example, a space map Go, we say that the space map Go is scalable because you can have a space map. Space maps are the panning surface from a space map Go. You can have different panning surfaces in every channel according to the sound effect that you want. So I could have, for example, a configuration with left, center, right, left. So this is a 7.1.4. So these are my top loudspeakers. And then I can move to a bigger place with a lot of more laterals, more frontals, more loudspeaker. But if I build my space map with the same concept, then if I have an automated trajectory here, it will work here and it will work there. So the only thing I need to do is just change the space maps from the new place and all the automation will work. It will be very good translated. But we need to think of that the mix maybe is not scalable. So if I have things that are in sync with the music and I have a bigger place, it won't work. So imagine like a symphonic orchestra. If I can play all the instruments around you, and it will be wonderful if you like to be like sitting in the center of the orchestra. But the effect and the emotion that this mix can have, it's great. However, if you go to a big place, this will work only for the people who is sitting in the center of the room. It won't work for anybody else. So what we could do, just place all the instruments on the front and use a reverb just to make people feel that they are in a closed space. So these are the tricks that we can use when we scale the system. If you have something that is not in sync with the music, you can scale and it's okay. So Roger Waters, they did concerts in stadiums where you can have planes and sound effects around the audience, but the time is not an issue. I want to make a brief comment. So this is very important to be clear that if you listen to somebody that says, oh, this is the limit in meters, there is no fixed limit to start to perceive an echo or not when you decide to work with opposite loudspeakers. So it's going to be a limit, but depend on the music, on the instrument. So it's not the same if you have percussionist or if you have strings. So the strings will tolerate a bigger space, but the percussion will need more rhythmic things. So this is something that you can use to, like, maybe leave the percussion on the front and maybe use vocals, strings to surround the audience when you are close to the limit. This is another research that you can do. And something that is nice is just you can create with Max, with any software, even with any digital audio workstation, some example where you can have, okay, I'm going to be the listener. I have one speaker and the opposite here. I will play one instrument here, another one, and then I can play with my listening position. I can even use headphones or 2 loudspeakers to try. And then I can, in this small app I created, you can know the radio where the audio will be okay. And you can position the audience in the radio that you know that everything is safe for the mix that you are working on. So then Arve will show you some examples that he experienced. Then the other topic, if we have the loudspeaker too high, it's great because we have more or less similar path between the closest audience and the listener and the last one. But the perception that this is surrounding you, that won't work because it's too high. So you will perceive that's coming from the ceiling, not surrounding you. But when I lower the loudspeaker, the problem I'm going to face is that now the trajectory from the first listener to the last one is even bigger. So I'm going to lose more dBs. So then it's another issue. So it's a compromise that you need to find between try to have more or less as much even energy you can in the audio surface, in the audience surface, but not too high that you break the illusion that you are surrounded by audio. Then we can discuss about the surround loudspeakers. So the question is, okay, if we have line arrays in the front, do we need line arrays around the audience? Because this is a lot of equipment, weight, etc. And that will depend on the content and on the space. If you have a stage and you know that always you will have a stage and the musicians will be there, so you have a fixed front. Maybe if you are in a museum, you can have a different experience and maybe you want to have a smaller system, but without any specific front. So you will have an even configuration. But in this case, it's an example where we can use much smaller loudspeakers because, for example, you can have, as I mentioned before, an orchestra on the front and use the surround loudspeaker just for the reverb, so you don't need to match the same level regarding to the headroom of every loudspeaker. Okay, then subwoofers. What we can do with the subwoofer. So there are several options. One is to keep one mono array close to the center, or we can have the typical configuration that we already use now, have left and right. But then, again, it depends on the content. If you want to have, for example, an effect that the train is coming from the back and turning around the audience, it's important maybe that you have a subwoofer at the back to have this effect of the sound coming, no? So you can have a distributed subwoofer configuration as we have here with 4 subwoofers on the corners, but what we don't recommend is to play the same sound in the 4 loudspeakers because it's going to create something like this where you have a lot of positions where you can have a lot of energy and a lot of several positions with a lot of cancellation. This is something that we don't want, except that you want to create this effect on purpose, and maybe you know that people can walk and feel that the valleys and energy positions. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So tuning up the system is need to calibrate this immersive system, and what we need to focus on is both time and level. So tuning up and calibrating this system, we place the mic in the center of the room, and then we time aligned all the different elements to the center, and then also match the level. Because when you move things around, you of course want to keep the same level so it doesn't jump up and down. And also the tonality of each speaker needs to be the same, so it sounds the same when it moves around. So those are the 2 things we need to focus on. And of course, when aligning any kind of system, phase is really important. We made sure the X40 here is aligned with the USW 112 below. The phase is really important in doing this, as many of you well know. And one of the tools Meyer Sound has to make this easy is the product integration, which means that whatever kind of speaker you have from Meyer Sound, it's going to help you align those phase traces and make all the different elements work together. This is, by the way, from Nebra, which is the software where you can monitor the AVB system and make everything run together and patch everything. And it's also remote show control of the Galaxy. So we can do the system tuning here with the EQ processing and delay and level and the level matrix and the delay matrix here. So this is what we use to calibrate the system. And
for Meyer Sound users, so we have Compass to control the Galaxy platform, which is the audio processor from Meyer Sound. And now Nebra slowly is including features from Compass. So what you can see on the screen is it's a future release that it will be available in a few months.
And luckily, I had the chance to calibrate this system using that.
Yes.
So soon to come. And one other thing we want to just mention is in that calibration, you have the delay matrix. So that means that when you have a certain position of an object somewhere, you can change the delay of that object. So to include a different delay and play with the time for placing different objects as well. So that's possible here. So now I would like to move on to showing some different
real life examples.
Real life examples. We have like some of the more recent ones. Of course, Meyer Sound's been involved in doing immersive sound for a while, but this is some of the more recent ones. Yeah.
So this is not the recent one, but I choose it because it's quite particular. Because
it is 21.
Well, it's not so recent.
Okay.
I was younger. So no, because it's very common that we have lower ceilings, like ceilings that are not so high. And if you want to use loudspeakers on the ceiling, it's an issue because it's difficult to cover the entire audience. So we discussed before that we need to be able to overlap all the surfaces. And if I place one loudspeaker here, I'm going to cover this circle. That's not useful. So for this place that it was in Berlin, what we did is just create like spots with 3 loudspeakers facing all the directions, and we could create a complete overlap surfaces from every point. So these 3 loudspeakers are they play the same information, but they are not overlapping areas between them, but they cover the entire place. So that's the particular thing from this example. Then this year we were in Montreux Jazz Festival. It's a wonderful place. If you have the opportunity to go, sometimes please go because it's free. Nobody knows. Like 17 stages, like it's crazy. Next to the lake, so beautiful. Only 2 stages are you need to pay the ticket. This one is for free. It's a jam session, and it's so great. Wonderful musicians until 4 a.m. in the morning. And what we did this year is to include a space map system. So we had the mixer, so people can mix in stereo, but they also could send some signals to a space map Go, and because we have the plugin, the Space Map Go plugin integrated in Digico, in this case, and also in the SSL. And the Avid, and the SSL too, but this one is the Avid. So yeah, let me show you some pictures. The setup, it's quite interesting. So this is the stage. Here you can see we had some cardiac configuration for the subwoofers on the ceiling. So we have the subwoofers on the front, but to reinforce a little bit at the back. And then we have this one as a delay from the front stereo system. And this is the setup for the entire configuration. So we had 5 loudspeakers in the front, and then we have this surround. And the result was really nice, and it was a very good experience for the sound engineer because they were playing different songs. He didn't know what was going to come, but he was able to choose some fun things and take some reverse and have 100% immersive, and then choose what other sounds he wanted to move. Because when you have the musician on the stage, the challenge is that you cannot move. If you can't see the guitarist on front of you, you cannot place the guitar at the back. But when you have keyboards and some instrument that is not so clear who is playing, maybe you can play a little bit more surrounding the audience. So this is an aesthetic criteria that you will create with you as long as you try things. It's a very interesting setup, and it sounded really, really nice. Do you want to continue with the next example?
Yes. Every year on Roskilde Festival, Meyer Sound and Roskilde Festival has a big collaboration, and we collaborate on stages in terms of design and calibration and also operating under the festival. This year we had this kind of special project with a band called Heilung. And for those who don't know Heilung, guess I would describe it as a Viking war ritual, and not really music, I guess, but it depends. But that's kind of my interpretation. So it's really like almost go into a trance by listening to this stuff. I listened to it for 8 hours to get to know it, and that was a fun day in the office. These guys, they had a goal of immersing the audience in the sound, and that's okay. So how do you do that? How do you immerse the audience? I worked together with Heilung and the technicians from there and Roskilde Festival to design this system, and also colleagues of mine. And the stage where this show happened was the arena tent. And for those who don't know, the arena tent, we call it the mother of all tents, because it's a huge tent. It's a serious stage, but inside a tent. So just to give you an idea of the size, it's 70 meters wide and 50 meters deep, and it has a capacity of 17,000. And we had 46 Panthers, which is the main line array, and we had 24 2100s, which is the flown subarray, and a fill of Leopards and delays with Leopards, and more. So a lot of speakers. And for the Spaceman Go system, the immersive system, we had 4 2100s and 16 Panthers, and then some X-42s, so a box similar to this one. So you can imagine that the scale between those systems is, we can't really do a lot. So what we ended up doing in terms of different positions is, this is an overview of the stage. So we have the main PA, left, right. You see on the last picture, there's these beams going down the tent. So that was pretty easy to place some overheads in there. So we had 4 overheads on each side, and we had a left surround and a rear left surround, and here and here. We would have liked to do it here, but that's a handicap podium, so we couldn't do that. We can blast those people because these are placed on the floor. So main system surrounds, overheads, and then we also made reference positions because we need to translate the end goal, to kind of a production rehearsal setup. So we made these reference positions, so one here in the front, one in the center, one at the mixing console, and then also one to the side. We wanted to try to make it possible for the band to hear those reference positions before they go to the festival, to make them understand what they could and couldn't do. And so I calculated a whole bunch of numbers. This is really boring, but the main thing is, from these different reference positions, you have a certain amount of delay. This is the thing Ianina talked about, like when you move this position around, the delay is going to change. And there's also a level offset, because all the different positions is not going to be covered by the entire system, unfortunately, even though we want it to be. So I quantified all of these numbers, and so this is a side view of it. So you can see these beams going down with the overheads and the stacks of the surround, which is tiny compared to the main PA. So coverage of the main system, you want to see a similar color. So this looks pretty good, actually really good. And what do you think about this? Do you see some issues here? Yeah? There's definitely more color here, or red color. So when people are here, they're definitely going to be blasted by this guy. But in terms of the level from all of these guys, I guess it's kind of similar, but there's definitely a limit to how loud you can go. So, yeah.
What's the dB?
This is just full scale, but so per color, this would be 3 dBs. Oh, no, sorry, it's not full scale. Yeah, so 3 dB per color, and you want to stay within ±3, right? Yeah, but this is definitely too hot, right? Or what do you think? Yeah.
It's always a balancing act. How that can get it consistent.
Yeah, definitely. But in terms of the things we talked about earlier, in terms of coverage, this is beyond that, at least. It's not fulfilling what we want it to be. It would be better to fly it higher, perhaps, to get the level more even, or something like that. But that's not a possibility. We have rises and speakers on rises, so that's what we have to work with. This is the overhead system. So what do you think about this? Better, I guess, right? It's more even. But remember, this is when everyone all of them is playing at the same time. If you only take like one, then it's only going to be this area. So if you pan something through this, you're going to hear, for instance, like a helicopter, which is both low end and high end. You're going to hear it's going to be if you're standing here. So when you play something in all of them at the same time, it's going to work out. So that's kind of the limits to this system.
And it's important to mention that this is because they didn't overlap the coverage. No, like every overhead was covering different areas. They could not do to overlap, because if you are able to overlap the coverage, it won't happen. You will perceive the helicopter there and then there and here and there.
Yeah. So you need to play the same signal through all of them for all the audience to hear the same thing, which is, I guess, not what you want. But we made this pre-production setup, which is it was a scale of 1 to 10. This is the front of house engineer from Heilung, and we power scaled the system to fit, so it's kind of similar, the size of the main PA compared to the immersive system. I integrated all of those calculations about the different reference positions, so they could recall those reference positioning when playbagging their music. They can hear, okay, how is it going to sound when I'm in the front? How is it going to sound in the center, in the front of house, to the side? So we did that. And quite fast they realized they dreamt of something different than what would actually be possible in the final setup, which is a good thing to realize, I guess. Otherwise it would be the show that fell through, right? So then we did another pre-production setup where they did the production rehearsal. So this is a scale of 1 to 10. So you see it's similar, like overheads. And then this is overlapping, but they knew the last one wouldn't. Surrounds and all that. So the show. They played. It was a great show. I was there. I really enjoyed it. There was definitely some obstacles to overcome in this project. But what was their end goal, I guess, was to immerse the people in sound. And they definitely did that, because they ended up using the system more as of a reverb system. So they ran some extra reverb through the system, and they also play some quiet tracks and stuff that's not time dependent. And it did immerse the audience. They had a few effects as well, with like arrows shooting across and stuff like that. But they didn't start to pan guitars or drums or stuff like that, because, well, they really couldn't. So they succeeded in their goal by immersing the audience, but they definitely also realized what's possible with that scaling. Yeah?
Thank you. And now I wanted to comment this installation, because it's quite impressive. So we have about 180 loudspeakers in the entire atrium. I'm not sure if you paid attention, but all the balconies have loudspeakers facing the center. Also, if you look at the ceiling, you will see 3 loudspeakers. All the corridors also have loudspeakers that are connected to the same system. So this is an Space Map Go system with all these outputs, and every channel can receive individual signals. So these are the planes from the place. These are some images from the installation. So it was really a challenge to install loudspeakers on top. It's 30 meters high. In one of the studios, there is a hidden door that you can access to the entire system with all the galaxies, the power supply we use to manage this spatial audio configuration. So there are 5 levels. Every level has loudspeakers facing the center, plus all the loudspeakers that are in the corridor, plus the subwoofers that are hidden in all the levels too. And what was interesting last year, what I worked with some students and we created some space maps. So I just give you an idea about the powerful of a Space Map Go, because as I mentioned before, it has a space map, and this is the panning surface that you can create. So in this case, what we can see here is in the center, I place the loudspeakers that are on the top. Then the first circle is the 5th floor. Then the second is the 4th, until you arrive to the 1st floor. So this is a kind of a spiral. So we had some animal like a mouse or something like that walking, and it was walking like it was going down or going up. So this is one effect. Then another one, in this case, It looks like this is the same space map, but it's not, because I use the virtual nodes to link the loudspeakers in a different way. So before, in the previous one, when I moved my target, my sound object, I could place the sound in any loudspeakers I want. Now I linked it different, and this one is level by level. So when I'm here, I have they call it voice of God on the ceiling. So these are the 3 loudspeakers. And then when I'm moving in a line, like in this direction or any other direction, what I'm changing is like I'm playing a complete floor, complete level, and then the other level, and then the other level. That's different from before, that I was positioned the mouse in or here or there. Now it's like floor by floor. So now you can see that it's going in circles every level. So different space map. Another one, so I take the same speaker nodes, which are the blue square, and here I have again the ceiling with the 3 loudspeakers, level 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And what I did here is like the subwoofers, which are these green hexagons, I link them, I place them at the bottom of this space map. So the effect that we play here, it was easy, like, and that was automated with the movement that it was doing this, so you could feel like, and when it arrived to the bottom, that will excite all the subwoofers in the entire building. So that's something nice that you can do with the space map, because in another configuration, you cannot take the subwoofer that is in this floor and place it in a different position. Now, space map is completely free, so you can link any loudspeaker and change the relationship with them as you wish. And then in this case, I created another space map. It looks like it's the same, but it's not. And now what I'm doing is I'm exciting all the loudspeakers except the ceiling ones. So it's like I have a sound like something happening, and suddenly and move to the ceiling. So now I'm in the ceiling. Now fading out the ceiling and fading all the rest of the system. So great. Now we are going to finish with the last example.
Yeah. So another example is Odense Theater, which is, for those who don't know, a city nearby. It's an old theater, a beautiful theater. I think they're going to renovate it soon, actually. So it might become even more impressive. I think it's a beautiful building. But in here, they have a 5 frontal system and an immersive system. So you see the 5 frontal, like similar to what we have here. And then we have some fills down here, which is covering the parts that this system is not. And then you see all these small dots everywhere and the blue ceiling speakers. This is from the front. So you see the different heights of the balconies. So there's multiple, if you see it, let's see if I have, yes, I have. Yeah, from the side and from the top. So if you look at it, the people on the floor, they have a ring of speakers all the way around. And actually they have an extra ring inside. So the people sitting on the floor here is covered when moving a sound source around like this. And then the ones underneath both balconies, they get extended to the yellow ones here. The next floor, you have another ring of speakers, so they will also get that movement. The second balcony, we have the blue ones, so they also get that kind of movement. So everyone can get something surrounding them. And of course you have the overheads and the front system. And this is composed, so frontals is X40 and 42, similar to this one. We have 750s as subwoofers, and yeah, I guess you guys don't really care about the models anyways. So the frontal system is covering the whole venue, which is the thing we talked about earlier, that you want it to cover all seats, because when you move that vocal through the 5 frontal, you want to make sure that everyone still hears the line, right? So, and it does. The surrounds, however, it's small MM4. They're not completely covering what they at least is supposed to by the philosophy, but this is still making a huge impact. So it might not be the like covering completely. Also, you saw the limitations of the Heilung setup, but it's still making a huge impact. But you need to consider it when designing, and either consider it or listen to it and realize that this is different in the seats. I heard a show there, and they're making it useful, and it's making an impact. So the panning surfaces, the space maps used here is they have one for the frontals. They can pan something through here, but when they move down this panning surface, more and more speakers are actually playing at the same time. So it's kind of making the sound centered one place or spreading it more. For the surrounds, so it's just one big surface, so that movement I described, so things will move around on the floor, but then all the different balconies are connected in this space map, and also a small queue system in the front of house position. So when you move something, everyone in the theater and the engineer is going to hear what that movement. How do you mix on a system like that? Because these, from where I come from, is mostly like left, right, on tour, and that's it. And I guess sometimes we need to think about how do you structure a console for that. And the way they do it is they have a Yamaha CL5 console there, and they basically use it in the 5.1 mode. So normally in 5.1 you would have those speakers spread around you, but they just connected it to the 5 frontals, because then they can actually just move that source pretty easy in the console through the 5 frontal system, which is kind of, I think it's pretty smart. And then they also have a few channels directly in the console, which is connected to the system, and they can move a channel there, for instance, a vocal, and then have that vocal moved in the SpaceMap Go system. They also have some aux so they can do that, and they have some lines directly from like the cue system of the sound effects to the system. So it's kind of a combined system. I think it's pretty smart, and it's working out for them at least. Yeah. Any questions about this? Yeah. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.